Larry Kudlow here for Colonial Metals Group. Ask yourself, is your retirement protected? Gold is the one asset that's surged through every war and economic shock. Please call 800-621-3908. That's 800-621-3908. Or just visit freegoldguide.com/Kudlow to claim your free 2025 Gold Guide. You'll learn how to protect your IRA or 401k and could qualify for up to $7,500 in free silver. That's freegoldguide.com/Kudlow.
Subtle results, still you, but with fewer lines. Botox Cosmetic, out of botulinum toxin A, is a prescription medicine used to temporarily make moderate to severe frown lines, crow's feet, and forehead lines look better in adults.
Effects of Botox Cosmetic may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness may be a sign of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Don't receive Botox Cosmetic if you have a skin infection. Side effects may include allergic reactions, injection site pain, headache, eyebrow and eyelid drooping, and eyelid swelling. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Tell your doctor about medical history, muscle or nerve conditions including ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis, or Lambert-Eaton syndrome, and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects. For full safety information, visit BotoxCosmetic.com or call 877-351-0300.
See for yourself at BotoxCosmetic.com.
The Red Apple Media Podcast Network presents This is Protecting America. Now, here's Emmy-winning journalist Rita Cosby.
And welcome to another edition of Protecting America. I'm Rita Cosby. Well, the UN Security Council met this week to discuss the Israel-Hamas war. This as a horrific video of an Israeli hostage held by the Hamas terrorist group was released, showing the emaciated hostage forced to dig his own grave in one of the dark tunnels below Gaza. And joining us now to discuss this and much more is Shahar Azani, former veteran Israeli diplomat. Shahar, it's great to have you here. This is such an important moment.
It really is. It's an important moment for Israel. It's an important moment for the world. It's an important moment for people who have morality, who seek justice. I mean, anybody, we often ask ourselves, Rita, looking at into the history, and I would hear it a lot from students when the studying of the Holocaust takes place, and we all think, what would I do had I lived in that time? Would I have, either passively or actively collaborated? Would I have been one of those heroes who strives to do the right thing and save people from the clutch of evil? And I think that this is exactly the moment where we stand in. Looking at that video of Eviatar David, whose prime is being Jewish and Israeli, and who was part of the Nova Music Festival on that horrible morning when Hamas savages infiltrated Israel and did what they did and continue to do what they're doing. Looking at him, looking at the extreme situation he's at, the physical and the psychological and emotional torment. And might I remind you and our listeners that this is the same hostage whom vile Hamas took with them in the car to one of the hostage release abominable ceremonies that they had, only to watch from a distance the release of their fellow hostages and documenting their responses, begging to be released. And then they released that video after the ceremony. Can you imagine what these innocent people are going through? And it's Eviatar David and Rom Breslavsky, another Israeli hostage who was filmed, whose video was released a couple of days ago, showing also with incredible emaciation, begging for his life. And there are 20 live Israeli hostages at the hands of that evil entity. Now, who do we stand by? Do we stand by Israel, who fights for justice and who seeks to bring back these innocent people home, or stand by the vile savagery of Hamas, which is worse than Nazism, because the Nazis at least tried to hide their horrid deeds. These vile terrorists of the most evil kind are proud of it, Rita. They're proud of it.
It's shocking when I see that video, and it's heartbreaking. And just like you said, these people are monsters. What they have done, the torment, the physical and the emotional torment, that's part of their game, right?
That's who they are. This is the kind of jihadi culture that they represent. And I want to speak to all of my fellow Americans who are listening to this podcast. I mean, if you are out there demonstrating and supporting that kind of savagery, then you need to question whether you're a human being. And if you think that you fall into their hands and they will treat you any different, then you've got another thing coming. We are almost 2 years to that horrid day of October 7th. And we remember that so many of the communities that were directly tortured, tormented and impacted by the savagery had been communities of people who've been trying their best to help Gazans, to assist them, to support them. The Cots family, who actually the two sons who were part of an elite basketball team in Israel, chose to go back home that weekend because their father and their family used to go to the fenced border with Gaza and fly out kites in support of neighborly relations. They were all butchered together in their beds on that morning. So they will show no mercy to you, because when they look at our culture, the freedom and the democracy and the principles upon which it stands, this is exactly the kind of thing that their savagery is aimed at. So make no mistake, we are not just fighting enemies of Israel. We are fighting the enemies of humanity, and we must all stand together at this minute to eradicate that evil from our world, lest it takes place in our own society, right here in our cities and our towns, because if it dares to dream of a victory, which will not happen in the fight against Israel, what starts with Israel never ends with Israel. We've learned that lesson quite well in the past decades.
Greg Kelly here for Colonial Metals Group, China's leading the largest anti-American alliance since World War II, one that's already dumped U.S. bonds, grabbed 43 million acres of our farmland, and is plotting to dethrone the dollar. That's why IRA and 401k savers are protecting their savings with gold. Go to freegoldguide.com/Kelly or call 800-655-5186 for your free gold guide on how to protect your wealth with gold 100% tax-free.
Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Sadly, you are correct. Give us a sense, Shahar, of the hostages that we believe are alive, because we believe there's about 50 of them that are there, but we believe only 20 are alive?
Yes, we have 50 who are still remaining in the hands of Hamas. 20 are believed to be alive. 30 are believed not to be alive. And we reached a point where Israel has agreed to almost all of the proposals made by Emissary Witkoff, by the mediators, Qatar and Egypt, in the hope of being able to bring these people back home. But it's quite clear that Hamas has no desire to move forward. They still dream. So if I try to simplify the position at the moment in the negotiations, is Hamas demands that Israel withdraws from Gaza and Hamas to remain with its weapon in power, controlling Gaza. Israel demands the exact opposite. That Hamas will leave Gaza, they will be their weapons will be dismantled and they will not be able to govern Gaza. And as long as Hamas dares to dream about controlling Gaza. And we all remember Ghazi Hamad, one of their leaders, who expressly said, by the way, to Western media outlets that their desire is to do October 7th again and again and again. No responsible government can allow for such an abomination to reside right next to our border. The Israel wouldn't allow this, nor should the United States or any other peace or life-loving country that has any kind of obligation towards its civilians. And this is why Israel has to consider different paths of action against Hamas, because what we've seen coming out of Hamas was not just targeting the Israeli hostages in Israel. We have seen Hamas gaining out of the misery of their own population. You know, Rita, let's discuss for just a minute the whole hunger campaign that came from Hamas that swept through the world. We've seen the New York Times posting on their cover page that picture of the Palestinian child, only later on to admit that that hungry child is not hungry but has a disease that makes him look the way he does. It's not the hunger that does it, but, you know, funnily enough, that picture was on their front page. The apology was on an editorial Twitter or X account somewhere remote with a few thousand followers. This is what happens to the truth today under the banner of the New York Times. The reality is that there's no starvation in Gaza. There is hunger in Gaza. And why is there hunger in Gaza? Mostly because, Israel brings the aid truck into Gaza. Then the UN itself, in their warehouses, delay hundreds of those trucks from coming into Gaza for various reasons. And even those that do come in, guess what? Hamas takes over those trucks to take away the supplies that they want to need away from ordinary Gazans, whom they shoot and kill if they try to touch those supplies. And whatever makes it beyond Hamas goes to the merchants who bring it to the market so that they can make money off of that aid that's coming in. So, yeah, is there a problem? Yes, there is a problem. And we can go back to the foundational equation. Hamas is the problem in Gaza and in the Middle East. Hamas is a problem for Israel and for the hostages. Hamas is a huge problem for Palestinians in Gaza. And that's why we've seen the Arab League, Rita, the Arab League calling for Hamas to put down its weapon and leave Gaza, not to be able to govern Gaza, because everybody understands the situation as it stands now. It's visible for the world to see, and this is the main goal that Israel strives to achieve, without which we cannot end this war. And we've known that even though this has taken place for almost 2 years, Hamas had the ability to stop the war at any given moment by surrendering, giving back the hostages, handing its weapon, and leaving the Gaza Strip or standing trial. That's been the equation all along, and I do hope that we will be able to achieve it as long as the world understands that and stands by Israel, not undermine Israel in achieving what is clearly the global interest against the jihadism.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, because, boy, they are fighting the fight for the world. You know, you talked about also the starvation campaign. One of the things that's extraordinary, most people don't realize that whenever there's a situation of war, I can't think of another moment in modern times where one country that has literally been attacked by the other is now trying to feed the civilian population in the other country. What Israel's doing, that is like an unbelievable action, Shahar.
It's unprecedented. We haven't seen this. And I'm not just talking about what the youth would call today ancient history, the fight against Nazi Germany and the actions taken by the Allies, but also most recent campaigns by the West, by the U.S., Australia, the UK, and other forces against jihadi centers in the Middle East. We haven't seen that kind of action taken anywhere. And that just goes to show you that Israel is being judged by completely different standards than any other nation, and especially for fighting the same kind of enemy. And when we talk about the world, Rita, and ahead of the month of September, the United Nations General Assembly, I want to talk about the prize. I want to talk about the praise. I want to talk about Hamas leadership praising Western leaders headed by the the Macron government in France, about to recognize, quote unquote, a Palestinian state. So Razi Hamad, again, Hamas spokesperson, came out and thanked Macron and some of the countries who agreed to recognize a Palestinian state, saying that this is a direct result of October 7th and their actions on October 7th, a recognition that is built on the foundation of rape and murder and kidnapping of children. And I think that needs to ring not just a red bulb, but a moral bell in the hearts and minds of everyone who is looking astonishingly at this horrendous image, understanding the profound immorality of that step taken, and beyond the impracticality of it. Because, Rita, what are they recognizing? A country with no leadership, a country with no defined territory, with no borders, a country, by the way, that was controlled, a part of the land that was controlled by Jordan and Egypt between 1948 and 1967, a time in which there was no call made for a Palestinian state. So this entire issue is quagmired in so much, I want to say, it's not just illegality, it's profound inhumanity and immorality. And I think that any Western leader who agrees to take such a step needs to take a good look in the mirror, because that kind of crime will not be expunged easily.
You know, you brought up France. I mean, you look at Canada, you look at UK. President Trump came out pretty quickly, which I thought was very important and powerful, saying he does not agree, that he thinks this is rewarding Hamas. Your thoughts as to why are these countries, why is UK? He meets with President Trump. They talk about a whole bunch of stuff, and then he comes out with this statement. France, Canada, there may be others too. Why? What is the goal of these countries?
Well, I do. First of all, I do want to take a moment and commend the U.S. administration and President Trump for taking a moral, truthful, and courageous step, looking reality in the face, as, by the way, the president has always done. He's always been able to look reality in the face and call it out the way it is, including that statement about Gaza being unlivable, because it is unlivable as a result of Hamas's warfare in the course of almost 2 years, hiding among civilians, among civilian population, within civilian infrastructure in order to protect itself. So kudos to the president for doing things the right way, including calling out those leaders who lack backbone and are trying to appease, in my opinion, their Muslim, anti-Israel, anti-Western constituencies within their countries at the expense of the state of Israel, not realizing that by succumbing to these forces, they're sealing the fate of their own societies. I mean, Rita, look at the streets of Paris and London today. Look at what's happening and the kind of struggle that's taking place on those streets. Look at what's happening in Germany. Look at what's happening in Canada. Look at all of these places where, by the way, in parallel to what we're talking about, anti-Semitism is rearing its ugly head everywhere. Attacks against Jewish communities and Jews go hand in hand with that kind of a submissive approach towards the masses, rather than taking the courageous moral step of speaking out the way you should for truth and justice. You try to kowtow to these forces that undermine your very society. So I feel for British society, for French society, and I do fear and expect that they will experience a very rude awakening in the near future as a result of these immoral positions that their governments are taking. Including, by the way, if I mentioned the Vichy government, I want to say something about President Macron, who compared the situation of who called for the release of Israeli hostages. Who called for the release of hostages on both sides, Rita. How can you compare Palestinian prisoners who were tried in Israeli courts for crimes committed and then imprisoned on the basis of a due process, legalities, and evidence to what the Israeli hostages are going through? Who does that? And I think it goes to show you what kind of person we're talking about.
That's extraordinary. Just like you said, to put them on the same level, that is just, it's shocking. And I am happy to see that our president, at least, is standing on the right side of history and is the leader of the free world. Thank goodness, they turn to. What about the UN? Because the UN had the Security Council meeting this week. I thought some really powerful comments from the foreign minister there, and also the brother of that Israeli hostage pleading for the world to step in. Yet the UN Security Council, I feel like time and time again, they have condemned Israel. And as far as I know, I don't think they've condemned Hamas.
I mean, look, first of all, it was interesting for me to see also the exchange between the Israeli foreign minister and the Russian representative who are criticizing Israel after the past, 3 years, what they've been doing in the Ukraine. I mean, the kind of hypocrisy that this institution represents. I mean, when we talk about the UN and the condemnation, I mean, these are not just words of hatred. It's an organization that has completely looked away from acts of anti-Semitism, from Hamas's crimes, from the plight of innocent partygoers who've been imprisoned, like in the worst of conditions, by this kind of savagery, and chose to say nothing. And that kind of silence is not just deafening, but it's also lethal, because it propels and it emboldens and empowers those savages into continuing to do what they continue to do. And I think that in this regard, we need to look into what the UN does on the ground. We mentioned the hunger that exists in Gaza and the United Nations' refusal to work with Israel and the United States in distributing aid to the population that goes not through Hamas, but around Hamas. And it's incredible to see that the UN stands side by side with this vile terrorist organization to make sure that Hamas is sustained. And if it does not happen, then they do not assist in bringing into Gaza the hundreds of aid trucks that are waiting at the gate. I mean, that tells you the story as it is, including, by the way, the UN agency in Gaza, the United Nations supposed Relief and Works Agency, which has become synonymous with Hamas, in whose schools you saw Hamas anti-Semitic, anti-Western propaganda, praising Osama bin Laden, praising the 9/11 attacks against the United States. I mean, make no mistake. Like I said, these are enemies of Israel, these are enemies of the United States, and these are enemies of humanity. And the United Nations continues to collaborate and to seek collaboration with them. I think that there needs to be a significant step taken by the freedom-loving nations of this world, rather than taking those UN dues as a given, to consider defunding the parts of the UN that continue to commit a sin against their own vocation, and that includes UNESCO, that includes the UN Human Rights Council and its vile supposed special rapporteur on Israel, Francesca Albanese, one of the most horrible anti-Semitic people that have been given an actual position to execute its anti-Semitic views and policies. And I think that the direction that the president has been taking in this regard is indeed the right one, because instead of wasting money on a dysfunctional United Nations, we might as well invest it in infrastructure and roads right here in the United States.
Leading a business today means constantly adapting. On the Executive Insights podcast, brought to you by AWS, global leaders share how they're making tough calls, testing bold ideas, and putting innovation into practice, generative AI included. If you're looking for real stories behind what's working, this is it. Subscribe to the Executive Insights podcast today, available now on all major podcast platforms.
Yeah, it's interesting. I talked with Alan Dershowitz a couple of days ago, Shahar, and he said abolish the UN because they're just, their mission has really become defunct, right. And especially when you think about its founding. Yep.
Irrelevant, and you know what's worse than irrelevant, Rita? They undermine societies today. They undermine the West. They've become the playground of the dictatorial jihadi regimes of this world.
Yeah, as opposed to standing with a moral compass for good, which is what they should be and what they were designed to be. It's shocking. It is a huge lost opportunity, but I'm glad you are fighting the good fight.
And somebody proposed, it reminds me, in light of the president's plan for Gaza, somebody proposed clearing up that beautiful plot on First Avenue and moving the United Nations headquarters to the Gaza Strip. once it's rehabilitated. Who knows? Might not be the worst of ideas.
Actually, that could be a powerful one if the Gaza Strip can be a peaceful place at some point in our lifetimes. And let's hope that happens, right?
Amen. Amen. Every day we hope, and we know what needs to happen. And as long as the more the world stands against Israel, the more this war is going to take longer. And the more the world stands by Israel, and Hamas understands that they have no avenue of support, neither in Canada nor in Vichy France or in the UK, then this will end faster for the benefit of everyone. That's the insanity of it all, right? And the tragedy of it all, Rita.
Yeah, absolutely. Hamas needs to be fully isolated and everybody needs to be on board. Well, Shahar, this was so powerful. Everybody, be sure to subscribe and share to this podcast. Boy, some important and really timely and huge issues on the table. And Shahar, thank you for your great insight, and also just you're such a great advocate for Israel and for freedom-loving people around the world. And we thank you always, Shahar.
Thank you, Rita, to you and to all of our listeners. Let's continue to stand by Israel, by the U.S., and by the world. God bless America.
And everybody, I'll be back soon with another great edition of Protecting America. And of course, you can catch me every weeknight, 10 p.m. to midnight on the legendary WABC Radio. This is Rita Cosby, and thanks for all you do to protect America.